The emergency alarm echoed through the massive Galactic Council building, its sound bouncing off crystal walls that stretched up toward a dome filled with swirling nebula light. Hundreds of alien delegates from across the galaxy had gathered, for what everyone knew would be a terrible meeting. The air itself seemed heavy with fear and desperation. Ambassador Thyra stepped forward, her body made of living crystal that normally glowed with soft blue light. But today, that light flickered and dimmed like a dying star. Her people, the Zilani, were known throughout the galaxy as gentle beings who had never raised a weapon against anyone. They were artists, musicians, and healers who had lived in peace for thousands of years. Honored delegates, Thyra began, her voice shaking so badly that the translation devices struggled to keep up. I come before you not as a representative of my government, but as a mother begging for her children's lives. Her crystal form pulsed with deep red patterns that every species recognized as the color of pure terror. The Vorthok Empire had been moving across their sector of space, a plague of locusts, consuming everything in their path. These weren't just conquerors who wanted territory or resources. They were destroyers who seemed to take pleasure in wiping out entire civilizations. Their massive warships, each one the size of a small moon, had appeared in Zilani space 3 days ago. They began with our outer colonies, Thyra continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. We sent peaceful messages, offered to negotiate, even tried to surrender. They responded by turning our cities into glass seas with their plasma weapons. Our children, our elderly, our artists and teachers, all vaporized in seconds. The chamber was completely silent, except for the soft humming of the translation devices. Even species that had fought wars for centuries looked horrified at what they were hearing. The Vorthok didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them from existence. Our planetary shields are failing, Thyra said, her crystal body now flickering. Between different colors, as her emotions overwhelmed her, we calculate perhaps 6 hours before they break through completely. After that, the Vorthok will sterilize our entire world. 20 billion souls will die, and with them, 15,000. Years of Zilani culture, art, and knowledge. Council Chairman Vexstar S8 Tentacles moved in complex patterns that showed his deep frustration. His species had led the Galactic Council for 3 centuries, and they had never faced a crisis this severe. Their combined fleets were already stretched thin, fighting the Vorthok on multiple fronts. And nothing they had tried worked against the enemy's adaptive shielding technology. We have no ships available for immediate deployment, Vexstar admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. Our weapons cannot penetrate their defenses. Our greatest scientists cannot find a solution. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces. Filled with despair? Perhaps we must contact the Deathworlders. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the quiet of respectful listening, but the frozen stillness of absolute terror. Every delegate knew about the quarantined sol system at the edge of civilized space, where a species so violent and unpredictable lived that the entire galaxy had agreed to leave them alone. The humans had turned their hostile world into a fortress of unimaginable violence. And now, the galaxy's last hope might rest with those savage Deathworlders. Ambassador Thyra Small. Diplomatic ship drifted through the dark void toward the human outpost, her crystalline hands shaking as she gripped. The pilot controls. The journey to the edge of civilized space had taken 3 days. 3 days during which more of her people died with each passing hour. The Galactic Council had given her coordinates to a human monitoring station, but what she saw ahead made her question their decision. The human structure looked like it had been cobbled together from scrap metal and salvaged parts. Compared to the elegant curves and flowing designs of other species' architecture, this angular mass of steel and ceramic plating seemed almost primitive. Warning lights blinked along its surface, and antenna arrays jutted out at odd angles like the spines of some mechanical creature. "This is Human Station 7, came a voice through her communication system, speaking in perfect galactic standard. Ambassador Thyra, you are cleared for Docking Bay 3. Please maintain current approach vector. As her ship settled into the docking bay, Thyra noticed something that made her even more nervous. The bay was clearly designed for combat, with blast doors that could seal instantly and weapon emplacements hidden behind retractable panels. These humans built everything like they expected to fight at any moment. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Thyra stepped into a corridor that smelled of metal polish and something else she couldn't identify. Two human guards stood at attention, their faces hidden behind dark visors, weapons held in ready positions. They were shorter than most galactic species, but built with dense muscle that spoke of a high-gravity world. Ambassador, one of them, said, his voice respectful but firm. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jimin is waiting for you in the conference room. Please, follow me. The walk through the station revealed more about human nature than any diplomatic briefing could have. The walls were covered with images of Earth landscapes, forests and mountains and oceans that looked beautiful, but somehow dangerous. Everything was built to last, with thick metal plates and reinforced joints that could withstand tremendous stress. The conference room was simple and functional, with a plain metal table and chairs that looked uncomfortable but sturdy. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jimin stood as she entered, and Thera found herself surprised by what she saw. She had expected a savage warrior covered in scars and battle trophies, but instead faced a man who looked almost scholarly, with intelligent, dark eyes and careful movements. Ambassador Jimin said, gesturing to a chair that had been modified with cushions to accommodate her crystalline form. Please, sit. I imagine you've traveled far and have urgent matters to discuss. His voice was quiet and controlled, but there was something underneath it that made Thyra's survival instincts tingle with warning. This wasn't the casual confidence of most galactic species, but something harder and more focused. Thank you, Thyra replied, settling into the chair. I come representing my people, the Zilani, and I fear we have little time. As she began describing the Vorthok's brutal assault on her homeworld, their scorched earth tactics and the millions of civilians facing extinction, Thyra watched Jimin's face carefully. Other species had shown sympathy when hearing her story, their expressions soft with pity and concern. But as she spoke, something different happened to the human's features. His eyes grew cold and hard, like chips of black ice. His jaw tightened, and she could see muscles tensing beneath his uniform. Where other species showed sympathy, Jimin's face transformed into something that could only be described as cold, calculating fury. We understand, Jimin replied quietly when she finished, his voice carrying an edge that made her shiver. We'll need 48 hours to prepare our response. 3 kilometers beneath the bustling streets of Seoul, in a facility that officially didn't exist. General Kim Dae-ho stood before a wall of holographic displays that painted a grim picture of the galaxy's current state. The underground command center hummed with quiet activity as dozens of officers worked at their stations, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of tactical screens. The Vorthok fleet positions floated in three-dimensional space before him, each red dot representing a warship capable of destroying entire cities. The numbers were staggering and terrifying. 27,000 enemy vessels arranged in perfect formation, their technology centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. It was the kind of overwhelming force that had crushed a dozen civilizations without breaking formation. Sir, Captain Lee Minho approached with a datapad, his expression grim. Intelligence has completed their analysis of the Vorthok military capabilities. It's not good news. General Kim took the report, his weathered hands steady despite the weight of what he was reading. At 63, he had seen humanity's worst. Conflicts, from the resource wars to the colony rebellions. His face bore the lines of a man who had made impossible decisions and lived with their consequences. Their shield technology is unlike anything we've encountered, Minho continued, pointing to technical diagrams on the display. Our kinetic projectiles, missiles, even nuclear weapons, they all just bounce off like rain on a window. The energy absorption rate is nearly perfect. The general studied the data in silence, his mind already working through possibilities. Other officers gathered around, their faces showing the same mixture of determination and concern that had become standard. In Earth's military leadership since the alien threat became known, what about their ground forces? Kim asked, scrolling through more intelligence reports. Heavily armored, disciplined, but they rely entirely on their energy weapons and personal shields, reported Major Yoon Jae-soon, the facility's intelligence. Chief, they've conquered every world they've attacked through superior technology and overwhelming firepower. No species has ever forced them into prolonged ground combat. General Kim's lips curved into what might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it, and they've never fought humans on human terms. He turned to face the assembled officers, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for impossible wars. Alert the Ghost Division. Want their stealth teams ready for immediate deployment. Contact the Iron Wolves and tell them to prep for orbital insertion. Send word to the Hellhound Corps. All battalions. Full mobilization. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of electronics. These weren't just military units. They were humanity's most elite forces, soldiers trained in conditions that would kill members of most other species. The Ghost Division specialized in warfare behind enemy lines, moving through environments no other being could survive. The Iron Wolves were drop troops who could fight in any terrain, any atmosphere, any conditions. The Hellhound Corps were engineers and combat specialists who turned disasters into opportunities. Sir Minho said quietly, "Even with all our forces, we're still outnumbered 20-1. Their technology advantage is enormous." General Kim walked to the main display, studying the tactical situation with the patience of a master strategist. "Captain, the aliens think they understand war because they've conquered peaceful civilizations with superior technology. They've never faced an enemy that thrives on impossible odds." He paused, looking around the room at faces that showed no fear, only grim determination. "You're about to learn what humans call total warfare. Not just military against military, but an entire species that refuses to surrender." Within an hour, orders were transmitted to secret bases hidden throughout Earth's solar system. Transport ships began launching from concealed facilities on the Moon, Mars, and the asteroid belt. Humanity was going to war, and this time, they were fighting for more than just survival. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear open as the human fleet materialized near Zilani Prime, their jump drives, creating ripples of distorted light that faded slowly back to normal starfield. What emerged from those dimensional rifts made the Zilani observers aboard their monitoring stations gasp in confusion and disappointment. The human ships looked like they had been built in a scrapyard by someone who had never seen proper spacecraft design. Where Vorthok vessels gleamed with smooth curves and energy fields that bent light around their hulls, the human fleet appeared to be nothing more than flying chunks of metal held together with welds and prayer. Their hulls were scarred and pitted, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to stop meteors but primitive enough to embarrass a developing civilization. "Captain." Song Hai-jin stood on the bridge of her transport vessel, watching the tactical displays with calm satisfaction while around her. Zilani liaison officers struggled to understand what they were seeing. The largest human ship was barely a tenth the size of a Vorthok cruiser, and their weapons appeared to be simple kinetic launchers, rather than the sophisticated energy arrays that dominated galactic warfare. "Captain," one of the Zilani officers said, his crystalline voice trembling with barely contained panic, "your vessels show no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no gravitational manipulators. How do you expect to fight the Vorthok with such primitive technology?" Song Hai-jin smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly terrifying. "We don't plan to fight them with technology. We plan to fight them with humans." Through the bridge viewports, they could see Zilani Prime burning. The planet's surface was dotted with fires that glowed like infected wounds, cities turned to glass by Vorthok plasma bombardment. The enemy fleet hung in orbit like a collection of silver daggers, their weapons systematically destroying everything that might support life. "Ma'am," reported Sergeant Choi Soo-jin from the deployment bay, her voice carrying the excitement of a soldier finally getting to do what she was trained for. "First wave is prepped for deployment. The boys are eager to see what these Vorthok can do." The deployment bay was a scene of controlled chaos as hundreds of human soldiers made final preparations for what everyone knew would be a one-way trip. Their armor was bulky and angular, designed more for protection than appearance. and their weapons looked crude compared to the elegant energy rifles used by other galactic species. But there was something in their movements, confidence and aggression, that made even the peaceful Zalani nervous. Major Yoon, Jae-sung's voice crackled through the ship's communication system, reaching every soldier preparing for deployment. All units, listen up. We're not here to match their technology or fight by their rules. We're here to show them what happens when you threaten innocent people. The drop pods were perhaps the most primitive-looking pieces of equipment in the human arsenal. They were essentially armored coffins with thruster packs, designed to carry a single soldier through atmospheric entry and deposit them wherever they needed to fight. No shields, no stealth systems, no sophisticated guidance computers, just hit-resistant metal and the kind of courage that other species couldn't understand. Deployment in 30 seconds, announced the ship's computer in a calm voice that contrasted sharply with the violence about to unfold. Through the viewports, they could see the first wave of drop pods launching from the transport ships, like seeds scattered by a violent wind. They fell toward the burning planet's surface, their heat shields glowing red as they punched through the atmosphere. From a distance, they looked like falling stars, but each one carried something the Vorthok had never encountered before. A human soldier with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The invasion of Zalani Prime had begun. And for the first time in their military history, the Vorthok were about to face an enemy that considered impossible odds. Just another day at the office. Commander Zethel stood in his command center aboard the orbital flagship, watching tactical displays that showed something he had never seen in 3 decades of conquest. The readouts indicated that human forces should have been eliminated within the first 6 hours of landing, crushed by superior Vorthok technology in overwhelming numbers. Instead, 12 hours had passed, and his ground commanders were reporting casualties that made no sense. "Sir," his communications officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. "Ground Force Alpha is requesting immediate reinforcement. They report being pinned down in Sector 7 by enemy forces using primitive kinetic weapons." Zethel's mandibles clicked in irritation. Primitive kinetic weapons against Vorthok energy shields should have been like throwing stones at a mountain. Yet somehow, these humans were not only surviving, but actually inflicting damage on forces that had conquered dozens of worlds without significant losses. Down in the ruined streets of Zalani Prime's capital city, Staff Sergeant Parkman John crouched behind a pile of crystalline debris that had once been a beautiful Zalani art gallery. The destruction around him was total, with twisted metal and shattered crystal creating a maze of death and shadows. But where other species saw only devastation, human soldiers saw opportunity. "Tahayan, movement at 2 o'clock, Minjone whispered into his cum, his voice barely audible above the distant sound of energy weapons fire. His squad had been fighting continuously for 8 hours, moving through terrain that would have been impossible for most galactic species to navigate. Private Kim Tahayan adjusted his sniper scope, peering through the smoke and dust at a group of Vorthok warriors advancing down what had once been a main street. Their energy shields shimmered around them like soap bubbles, deflecting every shot that came their way. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons sweeping left and right. As they searched for human positions, "I count 6 hostiles," Tahayan reported, his finger resting lightly on the trigger of his rifle. Standard patrol formation, shields at full power. The Vorthok had learned to expect certain things from their enemies. Most species fought in open terrain where their superior technology could dominate. They used energy weapons that could be deflected by shields, and they maintained military formations that made sense according to galactic warfare doctrine. But humans fought differently. Contact front. Tahayan shouted as the Vorthok patrol rounded a corner, their weapons immediately targeting the human positions. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, turning debris into molten slag where they struck. The humans' kinetic weapons spat bullets that bounced harmlessly off Vorthok shields. But Minjon had learned something important during the first hours of combat. While the shields could stop direct attacks, they couldn't protect against everything. "Target the supports," Minjin ordered, his rifle barking as he fired at the damaged foundation of a partially collapsed building. The structure had been weakened by earlier bombardment. and his bullets found the critical stress points that held it together. The building groaned and swayed for a moment before gravity took over. Tons of crystalline debris crashed down onto the street, burying the Vorthok patrol under an avalanche of rubble. Their shields protected them from the falling stones, but now they were trapped, unable to move or call for help. "Grenades now?" Gene shouted, and his squad rolled explosive devices into the spaces between the fallen debris. The explosions didn't penetrate the Vorthok shields either, but they didn't need to. The concussion waves traveled through the solid matter, creating pressure changes that the shields couldn't deflect. This was how humans fought. Not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to turn any environment into a weapon. Every destroyed building became a fortress they could defend. Every crater became a kill zone they could control. Every piece of rubble became a tool for victory. What should have been a quick conquest was becoming a grinding battle of attrition. And for the first time in Vorthok history, they were losing. Deep beneath the smoking ruins of what had once been Zelani Prime's largest research facility, Dr. Han So-young hunched over a workbench illuminated by the harsh glare of portable lights. The makeshift laboratory had been carved out of a partially collapsed basement, its walls reinforced with salvaged metal plates and emergency power cells. Around her, a team of human engineers and scientists worked with desperate intensity, their hands moving over alien technology that still hummed with deadly energy. The captured Vorthok power core sitting on her workbench was a thing of beauty, its crystalline structure pulsing with contained energy that could power a small city. The aliens had designed it with typical galactic efficiency, elegant curves and perfect symmetry that spoke of centuries of technological refinement. But Dr. Han saw something else in its design, something the Vorthok had never considered. Energy matrix is fundamentally unstable when subjected to harmonic resonance, she explained to Colonel Oh Sung-min, who had crawled through 3 kilometers of damaged tunnels to reach her laboratory. Her voice carried the excitement of a scientist who had just solved an impossible puzzle. "Look at these energy pathways." She pointed to the glowing veins of power that ran through the alien device like a circulatory system the Vorthok designed. These cores to be perfectly stable under normal conditions. But if we introduce specific frequency vibrations at precisely the right intervals, we can cause a cascade failure. Colonel O leaned closer, his combat armor scraping against the concrete floor. "In simple terms, Doctor, can't match there." "Technology," Han said, her eyes bright with possibilities, "but we can make it work against them." Every shield generator, every power core, every piece of Vorthok equipment has this same fundamental weakness. They built their entire military around the assumption that no enemy would ever understand their technology well enough to exploit it. While Dr. Han worked her scientific magic in the depths below, Captain Lee Dayun was proving that human warfare wasn't limited to laboratories and battlefields. Her special operations team had spent the last 6 hours moving through the city's damaged infrastructure, using maintenance tunnels and ventilation systems that the larger Vorthok warriors couldn't navigate. The Vorthok command post had been established in a captured Zelani government building, its elegant architecture now bristling with alien communication arrays and defensive weapons. From the outside, it looked impregnable. It's protected by energy shields and automated defensive systems that could track and destroy any approaching threat. But the aliens had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that all enemies would attack from obvious directions using conventional military tactics. They had never considered that humans might approach from angles that seemed physically impossible. "Entry point secured," Dayun whispered into her throat microphone as she removed the ventilation grate above the command center. Her team had crawled through air ducts barely wide enough for human shoulders. Moving with the patience of predators stalking their prey, the Vorthok commanders below were studying tactical displays, their attention focused on the larger battle. Raging throughout the city, they had no idea that death was about to drop from the ceiling above their heads. 3 targets, synchronized takedown, Dayun signaled to her team. Her soldiers moved with the precision of a surgical strike, their silenced weapons eliminating the alien commanders before they could raise an alarm. Within minutes, the command post was under human control. its communication systems feeding false information to Vorthok forces throughout the city. What had been a coordination center for alien operations became a tool for human victory. Above ground, the effects of human adaptation were becoming visible. Vorthok patrols found themselves walking into traps that used their own technology against them. Shield generators exploded without warning, turning defensive positions into craters. The tide of battle was shifting as human ingenuity met alien overconfidence. And for the first time, the Vorthok were learning what it meant to face an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. The steady roar of transport ships filled the skies above Zilani Prime as wave after wave of human vessels descended through the planet's smoke-filled atmosphere. But these weren't just military reinforcements arriving to join the battle. Mixed among the soldiers and weapons were doctors, engineers, teachers, farmers, and countless other civilians who had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to help a species they had never met. Dr. Jung. Jung stepped out of her transport ship into what had once been a Zilani elementary school, reduced to twisted metal and shattered crystal walls. The medical supplies she carried weighed almost as much as she did, but her determination was even heavier. Around her, other human medics were already setting up emergency surgical stations in classrooms where alien children had learned to read. Just days before, "We need to get the main medical bay operational within 6 hours," she told her team. Her voice steady despite the distant sound of explosions echoing through the ruins. "The wounded from both sides need treatment, and we're not going to let anyone die because we weren't prepared." Her field hospital was being established while energy weapons still lit up the sky overhead. But that didn't slow down the human medical team. They had trained for exactly this kind of situation, working in impossible conditions to save lives. While others fought to protect them, 3 blocks away, Engineer Nam Junho was doing something that made the Zilani observers shake their heads in amazement. While battles raged in the streets above, he was crawling through damaged utility tunnels, working to restore power to sections of the city that had been dark for days. His team of volunteer technicians followed behind him, carrying equipment that had been improvised from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity. "If we can get power to the residential sectors, we can activate the emergency shelters," Junho explained to a group of Zilani civilians who had never seen anyone work so calmly in the middle of a war zone. "Your people need safe places too. Stay while we deal with the Vorthok." The galaxy's news networks were broadcasting footage of the human response, and what they showed left alien leaders speechless. While most species evacuated their civilians from war zones, humans were bringing theirs in. While other militaries focused purely on destroying enemies, humans were simultaneously building hospitals, restoring infrastructure, and creating safe zones for refugees. General Krathen stood in his command ship, studying intelligence reports that made no sense according to conventional military doctrine. His analytical mind, trained in decades of successful conquest, couldn't process what he was seeing. "This is not how warfare is conducted," he told his staff officers, his voice carrying the confusion of a professional soldier facing something completely outside his experience. "They fight without honor, without structure, attack from impossible angles, use our own technology against us, and refuse to surrender even when facing certain defeat." He gestured at the tactical displays showing human civilian activity throughout the battle zone. "How can we defeat an enemy that has no rules? How do we fight people who treat warfare as just another problem to solve in a damaged community?" Center that had been converted into a refugee coordination facility. Former teacher Essio Mina was demonstrating exactly what General Krathen couldn't understand. Her gentle, classroom manner, once used to teach young students about literature and history, had been replaced by steely determination as she organized evacuation procedures for mixed groups of human and Zilani civilians. "Listen carefully," she told her mixed human-Zilani unit, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years managing chaotic classrooms. "We're not just fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right to exist freely, to raise our children without fear, to create something beautiful instead of just surviving." Round her, humans who had never been soldiers were learning to use weapons while simultaneously caring for alien refugees. Teachers were becoming tactical coordinators. Doctors were learning to fight while still healing the wounded. And engineers were building defensive positions while restoring civilian infrastructure. The Vorthok were beginning to realize they weren't facing just another military force. They were fighting an entire species that refused to yield. People who treated impossible situations as just another challenge to overcome together. Emperor Drexmore had conquered 47 worlds during his reign, each victory adding to the Vorthok Empire's reputation as an unstoppable force. His throne room aboard the massive flagship was decorated with trophies from defeated civilizations, crystalline artifacts, and precious metals that represented the complete destruction of entire species. But today, for the first time in his life, he was staring at reports of failure. "Impossible," he growled, his forearms gesturing angrily at the tactical displays surrounding his command throne. One primitive species cannot hold back the might of the Vorthok Empire. We have technology that surpasses theirs by centuries, numbers that dwarf their pathetic forces, and experience conquering dozens of worlds. His military advisors stood in uncomfortable silence, knowing that bringing bad news to the Emperor was often a death sentence. But the reports were undeniable. 3 weeks of continuous assault had failed to break the human resistance, and Vorthok casualties were mounting to levels that had never been seen before. "Deploy the Crimson Legion," Drexmore commanded, his voice carrying the finality of absolute power. "Every warrior, every weapon, every piece of technology we possess. I want this human infestation crushed completely." The Crimson Legion was the Emperor's personal guard, 10,000 elite warriors who had never known defeat. Their armor was forged from the cores of dying stars. Their weapons could slice through any known material, and their training was so intensive that most candidates died before graduation. They were the final solution to problems that conventional forces couldn't handle. Down on the planet's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Bei Suyang felt the vibrations through the reinforced floor of her command bunker as thousands of Vorthok dropships began their descent. The facility had once been a Zelani elementary school, its cheerful murals now covered by tactical displays and communication equipment. But the children's artwork peeking through gaps in the military hardware served as a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "long-range sensors are detecting massive troop movements. It looks like they're throwing everything they have at us." Bei studied the incoming data with the calm focus of someone who had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Her forces had learned to fight using a combination of human tactics and captured alien technology, creating weapons and strategies that no galactic military manual had ever considered. "All units, this is command." She broadcast 2 human forces scattered throughout the city, her voice carrying across dozens of frequencies. Simultaneously, "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent people. Today we remind the universe why Earth is considered a death world." The response came back immediately from hundreds of human soldiers, their voices united in grim determination. They had been fighting continuously for 3 weeks, adapting to alien warfare while maintaining the aggressive spirit that had made humanity dominant on their hostile homeworld. The battle that followed would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The Crimson Legion attacked with overwhelming force, their energy weapons turning entire city blocks into molten slag. But the humans didn't try to match them in direct combat. Instead, they used the ruins themselves as weapons, collapsing buildings to create new defensive positions, turning every street into a killing field. For 3 days, the fighting continued without pause. Human forces gave ground when they had to, but each retreat was carefully planned to draw the Vorthok into prepared ambush sites. Buildings that looked abandoned exploded when enemy forces entered them. Streets that appeared clear became death traps when hidden charges detonated beneath advancing troops. The humans had learned to use the aliens' own adaptability against them, constantly shifting tactics to prevent the Vorthok from developing countermeasures. Just when the enemy thought they understood human strategy, the defenders would completely change their approach, using captured Vorthok technology in ways its creators had never imagined. By the end of the 3rd day, the legendary Crimson Legion, had been reduced to scattered survivors hiding in the ruins they had tried to conquer. The retreat of the Vorthok fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships that had terrorized entire star systems for decades fled in complete chaos, their formations broken, and their commanders sending panicked reports about an enemy that fought like demons from the darkest nightmares. The mighty vessels that had once moved with deadly precision now limped away from Zilani Prime, many of them trailing atmosphere and debris from damage that should have been impossible to inflict. Emperor Drexmore stood in his damaged command chamber, watching his empire's reputation crumble in real time. News of the defeat was spreading across galactic communication networks faster than his ships could retreat. The Vorthok Empire, which had built its power on fear and the certainty of victory, was suddenly vulnerable to every species they had ever threatened. "Prepare the fleet for immediate jump to the core worlds," he ordered, his voice hollow with the weight of unprecedented failure. "We will regroup and analyze what went wrong." But even as his ships disappeared into hyperspace, Drexmore knew that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, and the humans had not just defeated his forces, they had shown every oppressed species that the Vorthok were not invincible. On the surface of Zilani Prime, Ambassador Theris stood in the ruins of her world's capital, but for the first time in weeks, her crystalline form pulsed with colors of hope instead of despair. Around her, human soldiers were helping Zilani civilians clear debris from their homes, while human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to restore power to damaged neighborhoods. "The Galactic Council has asked me to extend an unprecedented offer," Thyra said to the assembled human commanders, her voice carrying the formal tones of diplomatic protocol. "Humanity is invited to join the Galactic Council with full membership status, including all rights and privileges of advanced species." The offer was extraordinary. Most species had to prove themselves over centuries of peaceful development before being considered for council membership. But the humans had earned their place through something more valuable than technological advancement. They had shown the courage to stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. General Kim Dae-ho stepped forward, his uniform still bearing the dust and scorch marks of 3 weeks of continuous battle. His weathered face showed the exhaustion of someone who had carried the weight of an entire species' survival. But his eyes held the steady determination that had made victory possible. "We accept the Council's offer," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak for humanity. "But we do so on our own terms. We will not be just another member species focused on trade and diplomacy. We will serve as guardians for those who cannot protect themselves." The words sent ripples of excitement through the gathered crowd of humans and aliens. This wasn't just about joining an established galactic community. It was about fundamentally changing how that community operated, as news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy's communication networks. Something unexpected began happening. Species that had lived in fear for generations started sending desperate messages to the new Human Defense Command facility being established on Zilani Prime. The transmissions came from dozens of star systems, each one carrying the same desperate plea for help. Admiral Park Jimin, recently promoted from his position as a simple liaison officer, stood in the Central Command Center, reviewing message after message from threatened worlds. The facility hummed with activity as human personnel worked alongside alien technicians to establish communication links with every corner of the galaxy. "Sir," reported Commander Lee Minho, approaching with a datapad containing the latest intelligence. "Reports: we're receiving requests from 17 different systems, all under threat from various hostile forces. The Cathini are facing invasion from the Bloodclaw pirates. The peaceful Morden are being systematically enslaved by the hegemony. The agricultural worlds of the Tau sector are being strip-mined by corporate raiders." Admiral Park studied the reports with the same calm focus he had shown during the first desperate meeting with Ambassador Thyra. Each message represented millions of lives hanging in the balance, entire civilizations that would be destroyed if no one answered their calls for help. "Then we have work to do," he said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that impossible odds were just another challenge to overcome. "Alert all commands across human space. Send word to every fleet, every regiment, every volunteer unit The Deathworlders are ready to answer the call.